Montana Territory, 1885. The sun hung low over the vast expanse of Blackwater Valley, painting the rolling grasslands in hues of amber and gold. Levi Kincaid sat atop his chestnut gelding, surveying the land that stretched before him like an endless sea. At 25, he'd already spent more years than he cared to count driving cattle across these plains, his skin weathered beyond his years despite his youth. His lean frame carried the strength earned through honest labor, and though his jaw was clean-shaven this evening, a light stubble would return by morning, persistent as his determination. The frontier had taught Levi one truth that he held close. A man was better off alone. Independence meant survival in this untamed country. He'd watched good men lose everything: their land, their lives, their sanity, all for the fleeting promise of companionship. Love was a luxury the West couldn't afford, a distraction that dulled a man's edge when sharpness meant survival. "Boss wants us heading north by sunrise," called his trail partner. Levi nodded without turning. "We'll be ready." The approaching cattle drive would take them to Helena, a journey of weeks that suited him fine. The lonely trail was where he belonged, not in town with its temptations and complications. He'd built his life around the belief that attachment was weakness, vulnerability an invitation to pain. The wilderness asked only for respect and caution. It never demanded your heart. Yet in the quiet moments before sleep claimed him, when the campfire crackled and the stars wheeled overhead, an emptiness gnawed at him. Something was missing, though he'd never admit it aloud. He told himself it was just wanderlust, the need to see what lay beyond the next ridge. Nothing more. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Levi turned his horse toward the ranch house. Tomorrow would bring another day of honest work, another step in building the stake that would someday buy his own spread. That was what he wanted: land, cattle, independence. Not the complications that came with two hearts trying to beat as one in a land that showed no mercy. Little did he know how completely that conviction would be tested. 3 days later, Levi rode into Silver Creek, a growing settlement that served as supply point for the surrounding ranches. The town bustled with the usual frontier mixture: cowboys, miners, merchants, and the occasional settler family passing through to stake their claim farther west. "You boys got 2 hours," Levi instructed the 3 ranch hands accompanying him. "Get what you need and meet back here. No trouble." The men nodded and dispersed while Levi headed toward the general store, list in hand. He'd nearly reached the boardwalk when a commotion erupted from the stagecoach station across the street. A woman's voice rose above the din, clear and firm. "I assure you, I can manage my own belongings." Levi turned to see a young woman standing amid a collection of trunks and valises, her honey-blonde hair escaping from beneath a modest blue bonnet. She wore a traveling dress of deep green that accentuated her slender figure, dust from the road coating the hem. Even from this distance, her composure was evident as she faced down the stagecoach driver. "Miss, I'm just saying there ain't no one here to meet you," the driver was explaining. "Silver Creek ain't exactly prepared for a lady teacher arriving unannounced." "I sent word 3 weeks ago," she replied, chin raised slightly. "If the school board failed to make arrangements, that's hardly my concern." Something about her determination stirred Levi's interest despite himself. He hesitated only a moment before crossing the street, approaching with the caution of a man who knew better than to involve himself in others' problems. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, removing his hat. "Seems you might be in need of assistance." The woman turned, and Levi found himself looking into eyes the color of summer sage, intelligent and wary. She was younger than he'd initially thought, perhaps 22 or 23, with a dusting of freckles across the bridge of her nose. "I'm perfectly capable, thank you," she said, but her expression softened slightly. "Although I admit I find myself without expected accommodation. Rebecca Sutton," she added after a moment, extending her gloved hand. "The new schoolteacher." "Levi Kincaid," he replied, accepting the handshake briefly. "Ranch foreman at the Diamond K." The driver cleared his throat. "Well, if you're helping the lady, I've got a schedule to keep." Before either could protest, he tossed down the last of her bags and climbed back to his seat. Within moments, the stagecoach was rattling down the street, leaving them surrounded by Rebecca's belongings. "The boarding house is 2 streets over," Levi offered. "I could help you get your things there." Rebecca Sutton studied him for a moment, taking his measure with those thoughtful eyes. "That's very kind, Mr. Kincaid. I accept your offer." As he gathered her heaviest trunks, Levi silently chastised himself. This was precisely the type of entanglement he avoided, involving himself with a woman who clearly brought complications. Yet something in her self-assured manner intrigued him. She wasn't some delicate flower wilting in the Montana sun, but neither was she hardened by frontier life. "You've come a long way to teach in Silver Creek," he ventured as they walked. "From Boston," she confirmed. "And yes, everyone tells me I'm quite mad to leave civilization for the territories." They might be right. To his surprise, she laughed, a genuine, warm sound. "Perhaps, but not all classrooms with four walls contain the education I seek." By the time they reached the boarding house, Levi had learned that Rebecca was 23 years old, the daughter of a university professor, and determined to bring education to children who might otherwise grow up without letters or numbers. Her conviction was unsettling. It reminded him of his own younger self, before the frontier had taught him the cost of idealism. Mrs. Holloway, the boarding house proprietor, confirmed that no arrangements had been made for the new teacher, but offered a room regardless. "The school board meets tomorrow evening," she told Rebecca. "You can sort it out with them then." After helping carry the trunks upstairs, Levi found himself lingering awkwardly at the door to Rebecca's room. "If you need anything else, Mrs. Holloway can direct you. Most everyone in town is decent folk." Rebecca smiled, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "Thank you, Mr. Kincaid. You've been most gallant, though I suspect playing knight-errant to stranded schoolteachers isn't your usual occupation." "No, ma'am," he admitted, putting his hat back on. "I'm just a cowboy. We leave in the morning, cattle drive north." Something in her expression shifted, perhaps disappointment, though Levi told himself that was unlikely. "Safe travels, then. Perhaps our paths will cross again when you return." "Perhaps," he echoed, though he knew better than to expect it. Silver Creek was just another supply point, Rebecca Sutton just another passing acquaintance in a life designed to avoid permanence. Yet as he descended the boarding house stairs, Levi couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted, like the first tremors before an avalanche. He pushed the thought aside. He had supplies to purchase and men to corral before sundown. The sooner they left town, the better. 3 weeks on the trail did nothing to dislodge Rebecca Sutton from Levi's thoughts. He found himself wondering how she was faring, whether Silver Creek had welcomed her properly, if the children were responding to her Eastern education. These unbidden thoughts irritated him, evidence of the very distraction he'd always warned against. "You've been awful quiet this drive," observed Charlie, the oldest hand riding with them. "More than usual, even." Levi simply nodded, offering no explanation. What could he say? That he was preoccupied with a woman he'd spoken to once? It was foolishness, and acknowledging it would only give it power. When they finally returned to Silver Creek after delivering the cattle, Levi told himself he wasn't looking for her. Yet his eyes scanned the street as they rode in, noting the changes in the small town. A new sign hung outside what had once been an abandoned building, Silver Creek School. Curiosity got the better of him that evening. After settling the men at the saloon, he walked past the school, telling himself it was simply on his way. To his surprise, light spilled from the windows despite the late hour. Through the glass, he could see Rebecca at her desk, head bent over papers, her honey-blonde hair catching the lamplight. Before he could move on, she looked up and their eyes met through the window. Recognition dawned on her face, followed by a smile that seemed to illuminate the gathering dusk. She rose and came to the door. "Mr. Kincaid," she said warmly, "I see you've survived your journey." "Miss Sutton," he replied, suddenly conscious of his trail-worn appearance. "Just passing by. Didn't mean to disturb your work." "Not at all. Would you like to see what we've accomplished?" Her pride was evident as she gestured to the transformed interior. Against his better judgment, Levi followed her inside. The former storefront had been converted into a proper classroom with rows of benches, a blackboard, and shelves already filling with books. Children's artwork decorated the walls, and a globe stood proudly in one corner. "Impressive," he admitted. "The town must be pleased." "Some more than others," she replied with a wry smile. "But we have 15 students now, ages 6 to 14. It's a start." As she showed him around the modest school, her enthusiasm was contagious. Levi found himself smiling despite himself, drawn into her vision of what this place could become. For a woman so recently arrived from the East, she seemed to understand the frontier's needs. "And what about you, Mr. Kincaid? Was your cattle drive successful?" she asked, perching on the edge of her desk. "Successful enough," he nodded. "Though I reckon you'd find it dull compared to molding young minds." "I doubt that very much," she countered. "There must be freedom in your work, the open sky, new horizons each day. And dust, ornery steers, and too little sleep," he added, but without bitterness. "Though I admit the sky makes up for much." They talked longer than Levi had intended, finding unexpected common ground despite their different backgrounds. When he finally took his leave, the night had fully settled over Silver Creek. "Perhaps you'd attend our school exhibition next Friday," Rebecca suggested as they stood at the door. "The children are preparing presentations on local history. Your perspective would be valuable." Levi hesitated. This was precisely the kind of connection he avoided, a commitment, an expectation. "I'm not much for social gatherings, Miss Sutton." "It's educational, not social," she corrected with a teasing gleam in her eye. "But I understand if you prefer the company of cattle." Her gentle challenge struck a chord. "I'll consider it," he conceded, tipping his hat before striding away into the darkness, uncomfortably aware that his carefully constructed solitude was developing cracks. Levi told himself he wouldn't attend the exhibition, yet Friday evening found him standing at the back of the crowded schoolroom, hat in hands, watching as Rebecca's students proudly displayed their knowledge. The transformation in some of the children was remarkable. Young ones he knew had never before shown interest in books, now reciting historical facts with enthusiasm. Rebecca moved through the room like a bright flame, encouraging here, assisting there, her face alight with pride in her students. When she spotted Levi, her smile broadened, and she made her way to his side during a musical interlude. "You came," she said simply. "Seems so," he replied, uncomfortable with the warmth her observation kindled. "The children are doing well." "They're remarkable," she agreed, "though I suspect their parents were as surprised as you to find themselves here tonight." After the presentations concluded and the families began to disperse, Rebecca approached him again. "Would you walk with me, Mr. Kincaid? The night is pleasant, and I've been inside all day." The rational part of Levi's mind warned against it, but he found himself nodding. They strolled through the quiet streets of Silver Creek, the spring evening crisp but not cold. Rebecca spoke of her students, her hopes for expanding the school, and her gradual adjustment to frontier life. "And what of you?" she asked eventually. "You know much of my story, but I know little of yours. What brought Levi Kincaid to the Montana Territory?" He hesitated, unaccustomed to sharing his past. "Nothing remarkable. Came west after the war, worked cattle, saved my wages. The usual tale." "I doubt anything about you is usual," she observed quietly. "You carry yourself like a man who's seen much." Something in her perception unsettled him. "The West shows a man all he needs to see about life and death," he said more sharply than intended. "Teaches him what matters." "And what matters, Mr. Kincaid?" The directness of her question stopped him. They had reached the edge of town, where the boardwalks gave way to open country. Stars scattered across the vast Montana sky, bearing witness to his struggle for words. "Independence," he said finally. "Self-reliance. Out here, attachment is a luxury few can afford." Rebecca was silent for a long moment, her face thoughtful in the starlight. "Is that truly what you believe? That connection is merely a luxury?" "I believe it's the truth this land teaches," he replied, uncomfortable with her scrutiny. "I've seen good men destroyed trying to hold on to something that can't survive out here. Yet people do build lives here. Families, communities, schools," she countered. "Perhaps the lesson isn't that connection is impossible, but that it requires more courage than isolation." Her words struck too close to fears he'd buried deep. "You've been here, what, a month? The frontier has ways of stripping away Eastern idealism, Miss Sutton." "Rebecca," she corrected gently. "And yes, I'm new to this place. But some truths transcend geography, Levi." The sound of his name on her lips sent an unexpected current through him. They had stopped walking, standing now in the liminal space between town and wilderness, between civilization and frontier. When she met his eyes, Levi recognized danger more acute than any he'd faced on the trail. "I should get you back," he said, his voice rougher than intended. They walked in silence to the boarding house. The easy conversation of earlier evaporated. At the door, Rebecca turned to him, her expression earnest in the lamplight. "Thank you for coming tonight. It meant something to the children, and to me." Levi nodded, suddenly desperate to retreat to the safety of emotional distance. "Good night, Miss Sutton." As he walked away, he could feel her watching, could sense that something significant had been set in motion. For the first time in years, Levi Kincaid felt uncertainty creeping into the foundations of his carefully constructed beliefs. Over the next 2 months, Levi found himself drawn into Rebecca's orbit despite his better judgment. What began as chance encounters in town evolved into deliberate visits, dropping off books he thought her students might enjoy, helping repair the school roof before summer storms, occasionally sharing Sunday dinner at the boarding house. Each meeting chipped away at his conviction that attachment was folly. He discovered in Rebecca a spirit as independent as his own, yet unafraid to form connections. She had transformed the school into a true community center, organizing not just lessons for children, but evening classes for minors and ranch hands eager to improve their literacy. "You've changed this place," Levi observed one evening as they sat on the school's front step, watching the sunset paint the mountains. Rebecca smiled, pleased but thoughtful. "I hope for the better. Though I've changed as well. Boston seems another lifetime ago. Do you miss it? Civilization, proper society." The question revealed more of his insecurity than he intended. "I miss certain comforts," she admitted. "Hot baths that don't require hauling water, libraries with endless books, concerts." She turned to face him, her sage green eyes direct. "But I don't miss the constraints, the endless propriety. Here, I'm judged by my contributions, not my family name or social connections." Levi nodded, understanding completely. Freedom has different meanings to different folks. "Indeed it does." She hesitated, then added softly, "My father wrote again, asking when I'll come to my senses and return east. He can't understand that I've found purpose here." "And have you?" "Found purpose." Her smile returned, warming him like the day's last sunlight. "More than I dreamed possible. These children, this community, they matter. The work matters." Left unspoken was the question that hung between them. Did he matter too? Levi couldn't bring himself to ask, nor could he entirely quell the hope that he might. As June bloomed into July, rumors of unrest began filtering into Silver Creek. Tensions between cattle interests and homesteaders had escalated north of town, with accusations of fence cutting and poisoned water holes. When the Diamond K's owner announced they would join neighboring ranches in a show of force against the sodbusters, Levi found himself torn between loyalty to his employer and his growing distaste for the brewing conflict. The evening before he was to ride out, he sought Rebecca at the school. She was alone, writing letters by lamplight, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. "I came to say I'll be gone for a time," he said without preamble. "Ranch business up north." Rebecca set down her pen, concern etching her features. "The homesteader dispute? I've heard troubling reports." "Just talk so far," he assured her, though uncertainty gnawed at him. "The bosses want to make a statement, remind folks about water rights and open range." "Intimidation, you mean?" Her directness was one of the qualities he'd come to admire, even when it made him uncomfortable. "It's complicated territory, Rebecca." She stood, moving around the desk to face him directly. "Is it? Or is it simply powerful men protecting their interests at the expense of families trying to build homes?" Her challenge struck at the heart of doubts he'd been harboring. "I've worked cattle my whole life. It's what I know. You know right from wrong as well," she said quietly. "I've seen that in you, Levi. The way you treat others, the respect you show regardless of station." They stood close now, the lamplight casting soft shadows across her face. Levi was acutely aware of how much had changed between them since that first meeting, how much had changed in him. "What would you have me do?" he asked, voice low. "Turn my back on the outfit that's been my livelihood for years." "I would have you follow your conscience," she answered. Nothing more, nothing less. The simplicity of her faith in him was overwhelming. Before he could master himself, Levi reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. Rebecca's eyes widened, but she didn't pull away. "You make me question everything I thought I knew," he confessed. "Is that so terrible?" she whispered. "It might be." And then, because he couldn't help himself, Levi leaned forward and kissed her. The contact was brief but profound, a crossing of boundaries both physical and emotional. When he pulled back, Rebecca's expression was a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. "I shouldn't have done that," he said, already retreating emotionally even as he stepped back physically. "Perhaps not," she agreed, touching her fingers briefly to her lips. "But I can't bring myself to regret it." The honesty in her words made what he had to say next even harder. "I'm not. I can't offer what you deserve, Rebecca. This life I lead doesn't allow for what, Levi? For connection? For caring about someone beyond yourself?" A flash of hurt crossed her face. "Or is it simply that you're afraid?" Her perception cut too deep. "This isn't about fear. It's about reality. The West breaks people who try to build something permanent here." "That's not the West speaking," she said quietly. "That's your pain." Levi stepped back further, rebuilding the walls her presence had begun to erode. "I ride out at dawn. When I return, it would be best if we remembered our proper stations. You're the schoolteacher. I'm a cowhand. Anything else invites complication neither of us needs." The hurt in her eyes was unmistakable now, but her voice remained steady. "If that's truly what you believe is best, Mr. Kincaid." The formality stung worse than anger would have. Levi nodded stiffly, replacing his hat. "Good evening, Miss Sutton. Stay well." As he walked into the summer night, Levi told himself he'd done the necessary thing. Attachment led to pain. He'd seen it too many times. Better to end whatever was growing between them before it took deeper root. Yet the ache in his chest suggested it might already be too late for such caution. The Cattle Association's show of force turned ugly faster than anyone anticipated. What was meant to be intimidation escalated to burning homesteads when shots were fired at a rancher's party. By the time Levi and the Diamond came in arrived, the situation was spiraling toward open-range war. "We're making an example of the Schmidt place tomorrow," announced Harlan Weber, the Cattle Association's leader. "Either they pull up stakes, or they'll wish they had." Levi frowned, uncomfortable with the direction events were taking. "The Schmidts have young children. Surely there's room for negotiation." Weber fixed him with a cold stare. Negotiation ended when they fenced creek access. "You going soft on us, Kincaid?" "Just suggesting we remember we're supposed to be the civilized parties here," Levi replied evenly. That night, unable to sleep, Levi thought of Rebecca. What she would say about this situation, how disappointed she would be to see him participating even passively in such intimidation. The realization that her opinion mattered more to him than the respect of men he'd worked alongside for years was unsettling. Before dawn, he made his decision. Saddling his horse quietly, Levi rode ahead to the Schmidt homestead, a modest sod house with carefully tended fields and a small barn. Heinrich Schmidt met him at the door with a shotgun. "I come to warn you," Levi said, hands raised. "The Cattle Association men are coming at first light. They mean to burn you out." Schmidt's weathered face hardened. "So you come to threaten first? We have rights to this land. Legal paper." "I'm not here for the association," Levi explained. "I'm here because what they're planning isn't right. You need to get your family to safety." Suspicion warred with fear in the homesteader's eyes. Finally, he lowered the shotgun slightly. "Why would you turn against your own kind?" The question struck at the heart of Levi's internal struggle. "Because there comes a time when a man has to decide what kind of West he wants to live in," he answered. "And I don't want to live in one where families are terrorized off land they've rightfully claimed." Within the hour, Schmidt's wife and children were loaded into their wagon with what valuables they could carry, heading for the protection of the marshal in the nearest large town. Schmidt himself refused to leave. "This is my home," he said simply. "I will not run." Levi respected the man's courage, but feared for his life. "At least let me stay until they come. Perhaps I can reason with them." The sun was barely above the horizon when the Cattle Association party arrived, 15 men with grim faces and rifles. Weber's expression darkened when he saw Levi standing beside Schmidt on the homesteader's porch. "What the hell is this, Kincaid?" "This has gone far enough," Levi called back. "Schmidt has legal claim to this land. If there's dispute about water access, it belongs in court, not at the end of a torch." "You've chosen your side poorly," Weber spat. "Step aside or be treated like any other sodbuster." Levi stood his ground. "There doesn't have to be sides. There's room enough for all if we're willing to adapt." "Adapt?" Another rancher laughed harshly. "That's easy for a hired hand to say. Some of us have generations invested in the open range. And some of us believe in a future where homesteaders and cattlemen build something better together, Levi countered. Like they're doing in Silver Creek. The mention of Silver Creek seemed to further incense Weber. That teacher put these ideas in your head? That Eastern woman playing pioneer? She'll be gone when winter hits. Back to her comfortable city life. The disparagement of Rebecca ignited something fierce in Levi. Miss Sutton has more true grit than men who'd threaten families to protect their convenience, he said, voice dangerously quiet. Now I suggest you all turn around and find a better way to resolve your grievances. For a tense moment, violence seemed inevitable. Then a rider appeared from the east, pushing his horse hard. It was Marshal Thompson from Silver Creek. That's far enough, gentlemen. The marshal called as he reined in. I've got 20 deputized men on their way, and telegraph messages have gone to the governor and territorial authorities. Weber's face contorted with fury. This isn't your jurisdiction, Thompson. Maybe not, the marshal agreed calmly, but threatening homesteaders with legal claims puts it under federal interest. You boys want to explain your actions to a federal marshal? The standoff stretched for several more minutes before the cattlemen reluctantly withdrew, Weber promising Levi he'd never work cattle in the territory again. As they rode away, Marshal Thompson dismounted, approaching the porch. Got word from Miss Sutton there might be trouble, he explained. She was mighty concerned when she heard where the Diamond K men were headed. Levi's heart constricted at the mention of Rebecca. She sent you. More like convinced half the town you'd need backup, Thompson said with a wry smile. Seems she has considerable faith in your character, even if she wasn't sure about your employer's intentions. The knowledge that Rebecca had still believed in him, even after their painful parting, hit Levi with unexpected force. While he had been busy pushing her away to protect himself from vulnerability, she had been acting to protect him from danger. It was a humbling revelation. By the time Levi returned to Silver Creek 3 days later, the town was buzzing with accounts of the confrontation. He'd been fired from the Diamond K, as expected, but found the loss less troubling than it might have been months earlier. Somehow, standing up for what he believed mattered more than security. He went directly to the schoolhouse, but found it empty. Mrs. Holloway at the boarding house informed him that Rebecca had fallen ill 2 days prior. Fever took her hard, the older woman explained. Doctor says it's not serious, but she needs rest. Been pushing herself too hard, worrying about those homesteader families and you riding into trouble. Concern propelled Levi up the stairs to Rebecca's room. After a soft knock, he heard her voice, weaker than usual, inviting him to enter. She lay propped against pillows, her honey blonde hair loose around shoulders that seemed too thin in her nightdress. Her normally vibrant face was pale, though her eyes brightened when she saw him. Levi, she breathed. You're safe. He moved to her bedside, suddenly uncertain. Thanks to you, from what the marshal says. A ghost of her usual smile appeared. I merely suggested he might want to check on the situation. The townspeople made their own decisions. You built something here, Rebecca. A community that stands together. He took her hand, finding it too warm with fever. I was wrong about so many things. She studied his face, her sage-green eyes searching. Tell me what happened. Levi related the events at the Schmidt homestead, watching as concern, relief, and pride crossed her expressive features. When he finished, she squeezed his hand. You did a brave thing, she said softly. I did what you would have done, he replied. What you helped me see was right. Rebecca shook her head slightly. No, Levi, you found your own conscience. I merely... She paused, a cough interrupting her words. You merely showed me that my beliefs about the frontier were wrong, he finished for her. That connection isn't weakness. That community can thrive even in harsh places. He hesitated, then added, that caring for someone doesn't make you vulnerable. It makes you stronger. Her eyes widened at his words, hope dawning in their depths. Does that mean? It means I was afraid, Levi admitted. Afraid of feeling something that could be taken away. But these past days taught me that closing yourself off doesn't protect you from loss. It just guarantees it. Rebecca's smile bloomed fully now, transforming her fever-touched face. That's quite a revelation for a man who claimed attachment was a luxury the frontier couldn't afford. I had an excellent teacher, he replied, his own smile breaking through. One who wasn't afraid to challenge a stubborn cowboy's misconceptions. They talked until Rebecca's eyelids grew heavy with exhaustion. As she drifted toward sleep, Levi rose to leave, promising to return the next day. At the door, her voice stopped him. Levi, what will you do now? Without your position at the Diamond K? He turned back, finding certainty where once there had been only wariness. I've been saving for my own place for years. There's a small spread north of town that might be for sale. Not much, but enough to start. A ranch of your own, she murmured, clearly fighting sleep. That's a fine dream. It is, he agreed, but incomplete without someone to share it. Her eyes found his across the dimming room, a question in their depths that he wasn't yet ready to answer fully. But for the first time, Levi allowed himself to imagine a future that included more than solitary independence, a future bright with possibility and shared dreams. Rebecca's recovery took longer than expected, the fever lingering for nearly 2 weeks. During that time, Levi visited daily, bringing books, news, and increasingly, his hopes for the future. They talked for hours, learning each other's stories in deeper measure, her privileged but lonely childhood in Boston, his loss of family during the war, their shared love of literature and open spaces. By the time Rebecca returned to teaching, something profound had shifted between them. What had begun as reluctant attraction had deepened into genuine understanding and affection. The town noticed, of course, Silver Creek was too small for secrets, but rather than disapproval, Levi found unexpected support. About time you saw what was right in front of you, Marshall Thompson commented one afternoon. That woman's been good for this town. Might be good for you too. Levi had secured the small ranch he'd mentioned, a modest operation with potential for growth given care and hard work. He hired 2 reliable hands and began building toward sustainability, conscious that his decisions now carried greater weight than when he'd been answerable only to himself. One crisp October evening, he invited Rebecca to see the improvements he'd made to the ranch house. He'd added a proper porch, repaired the roof, and furnished the main room with bookshelves he'd built himself. It's wonderful, she exclaimed, running her fingers along the smooth wood of the shelves. You've created something special here. Levi watched her explore the space, his heart fuller than he'd ever imagined possible. It's still rough, he admitted. Not what you're accustomed to. Rebecca turned to him, autumn sunlight streaming through the window, illuminating her face. What I'm accustomed to isn't what I want, Levi. I thought you understood that by now. I'm beginning to, he said, moving closer. But I need to be certain about something. She raised an eyebrow, waiting. This life, ranching in Montana territory, it's hard in ways Eastern living isn't. Winters that seem endless, work that never truly stops, distances that separate you from society and culture. I need to know that you're choosing it with open eyes. Rebecca's expression softened. Is that what worries you? That I'll wake up one morning missing Boston parlors and paved streets? It's happened before. People come west with dreams and leave with disappointment. She stepped closer, taking both his hands in hers. I came west seeking purpose and freedom, Levi. I found both, along with something I never expected. Her eyes held his, unwavering. I found you, a man whose courage and integrity matched this magnificent, challenging land. The sincerity in her voice threatened to undo him completely. Levi drew her closer, one hand gently touching her cheek. I love you, Rebecca, more than I thought possible. But I won't ask you to sacrifice. It's not sacrifice when you're choosing what matters most, she interrupted gently. And you matter, Levi. This place, the school, the community we're building, it all matters more than any comfort I left behind. He kissed her then, pouring years of loneliness and newfound hope into the connection. When they finally parted, both breathless, Levi knew he'd crossed a threshold from which there was no return, nor did he wish for one. Marry me, he whispered against her hair. Build this life with me. It won't be easy, but I promise it will be worth every hardship. Rebecca pulled back just enough to meet his gaze, her sage-green eyes bright with emotion. Yes, she began, then hesitated, a shadow crossing her face. But Levi, there's something you should know first. The sudden solemnity in her tone sent a chill through him. What is it? She took a deep breath, stepping back slightly. I care for you deeply, more than I've ever cared for anyone. But marriage, I'm not sure I'm ready. The school is still finding its footing, and I promised the school board a full year at minimum. Levi felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. You're saying no? I'm saying not yet, she clarified, her eyes pleading for understanding. I need time, Levi. Time to be certain I can be both a teacher and a wife. Time to know my own mind fully. The request struck at his deepest insecurities, that he wasn't enough, that frontier happiness was ultimately illusory. Yet as he looked at Rebecca, at her honest struggle, he recognized something profound. Her hesitation wasn't rejection, but integrity. She wouldn't make promises lightly, especially not to him. Swallowing his disappointment, Levi nodded slowly. I understand. Do you? She asked softly. Because I couldn't bear to lose what we've found over this. The fear in her voice reached him where nothing else might have. Taking her hands again, he summoned a smile. Rebecca Sutton, I have waited my entire life to find someone worth loving. I reckon I can wait a bit longer for you to be ready. Relief flooded her features. You're not angry? Disappointed, yes. Angry, no. He brushed a strand of honey-blonde hair from her face. Some things are worth waiting for, even forever if need be. The words were impulsive but deeply felt. In that moment, Levi realized that for all his fear of attachment, he'd crossed into territory where the greater fear was losing what they might build together. Rebecca's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I don't deserve such patience. You deserve far more, he corrected gently. And when you're ready, truly ready, I'll be here. Winter descended on Montana territory with characteristic ferocity, blanketing Silver Creek in snow and isolation. The school remained open despite the weather, with Rebecca often staying late to ensure the building was warm enough for the next day's lessons. Levi made it a habit to escort her back to the boarding house on those evenings, their walks a precious time for conversation uninterrupted by the demands of their separate responsibilities. Though Rebecca hadn't yet accepted his proposal, their relationship deepened through shared experience. The Christmas pageant they organized together, the night they spent rescuing a family trapped by blizzard, the quiet evenings reading by lamplight when the cold made outdoor activity impossible. February brought news that changed everything. The territorial government, impressed by Silver Creek's educational progress, offered Rebecca a position overseeing the development of schools throughout the region. It was an extraordinary opportunity, recognition of her talents, and a chance to expand her influence far beyond one small town. It would mean traveling extensively, she explained as they sat before the fire in the boarding house parlor. Months away, establishing programs in remote settlements. Levi absorbed the information, feeling the fragile future he'd begun imagining slip away. It sounds perfect for you. Expanding education across the territory, it's everything you came west to accomplish. Rebecca studied his face carefully. You think I should accept? I think, he said carefully, that you have a rare chance to make a difference on a scale few ever achieve. I wouldn't stand in the way of that, even though it would mean postponing any thoughts of us building a life together. Her voice was hesitant, testing his reaction. The question cut deep, but Levi found strength in his love for her. I meant what I said, Rebecca. I'll wait for as long as it takes. She was quiet for a long moment, the firelight playing across her thoughtful features. And what if I don't want to postpone our future any longer? Levi's heart stuttered. What are you saying? I'm saying, she began, moving to kneel beside his chair, taking his hands in hers, that these months have shown me everything I need to know. The work matters, yes, but without someone to share it with, someone who understands both the work and me, it's incomplete. Hope rose in his chest, cautious but insistent. Rebecca, I love you, Levi Kincaid, she said, her voice strong and clear. I love your integrity, your courage, your quiet strength. I love the man who stood against injustice and who builds bookshelves for a future he can only hope for. Joy surged through him, but uncertainty lingered. What about the territorial position? Your dream. Dreams change, she replied simply. Or rather, they expand to include new possibilities. I can still contribute to education while making a home with you. In fact, I believe I'll be more effective with you by my side. Levi pulled her up and into his embrace, his heart too full for words. When he finally found his voice, it was rough with emotion. I promised I'd wait forever if needed. I'm grateful it won't be quite that long. Rebecca laughed against his chest. Forever is still on offer, just in a different form. They were married in April 1886, when the Montana spring had begun to soften the land with new green. The ceremony took place in the schoolhouse, transformed by Rebecca's students with wildflowers and hand-drawn decorations. The entire town turned out, along with homesteaders from surrounding areas, including Heinrich Schmidt and his family, who stood as witnesses. Rebecca wore a simple gown of ivory silk, her honey-blonde hair adorned with spring blossoms. At 24, she had never looked more beautiful to Levi than when she walked toward him down the makeshift aisle, sage-green eyes bright with certainty and love. As they spoke their vows, Levi marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, he had believed himself immune to attachment, convinced that the frontier demanded isolation as the price of survival. Now, surrounded by community and joined to the woman he loved, he understood that the West's true lesson was precisely the opposite. Only through connection could one truly thrive in this demanding land. "I never thought I'd find home in a person," he told Rebecca that night, as they stood on the porch of their ranch house, gazing at stars scattered across the Montana sky. "Always figured it was a place, or maybe just a feeling of independence." She leaned against him, fitting perfectly under his arm. "And now I know it's wherever you are," he said simply, "though I'm partial to this particular spot." Rebecca laughed, the sound carrying across land that was now truly theirs, not just in deed but in shared purpose. "As am I. Room for a garden, proximity to the school, and stars beyond counting." "And room to grow," Levi added meaningfully. She turned in his arms, her expression softening. "A family, you mean?" "In time," he nodded. "If you want that." "I do," she whispered. "Children with your integrity, and perhaps a touch of my stubbornness." "Heaven help us all," Levi chuckled, kissing her forehead. As they stood embraced beneath the vast Montana sky, Levi Kincaid finally understood what had eluded him for so long. The frontier wasn't a place that demanded isolation as protection against its harshness. Rather, it was a landscape that revealed, with painful clarity, the essential truth that humans were never stronger than when they stood together, never more complete than when they dared to love despite uncertainty. Rebecca had taught him that lesson, but more importantly, she had given him the courage to believe it. "I would have waited forever," he murmured into her hair. "But I'm grateful beyond words that I didn't have to." "So am I," Rebecca replied, lifting her face to his. "Some journeys are meant to be shared from the beginning." Their kiss sealed not just a marriage, but a partnership forged in mutual respect and understanding. Together, they would face whatever the frontier brought: harsh winters, summer drought, the challenges of building both ranch and school. But they would face it as one, their love not a vulnerability but their greatest strength against whatever lay ahead. And in that knowledge, they found a peace that neither had believed possible in the untamed West, the certainty that they had found, at last, their true home in each other.